Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Here today we're going to do a quick tutorial on how to sew a regular scrunchie and a zipper scrunchie. So it'll be kind of in two different parts, but it's very similar steps, so we're just going to kind of fly through it together. This is going to be a machine sewing version. I'll have the hand sewing version available after this, probably in about a week, so just look out for that too. So first things first, let's start off with some basic tools you're going to need. You're definitely going to need a clear acrylic ruler or any kind of like straight edge ruler that you're going to use to cut. You can get a small pair of scissors, full-size pair of scissors. A sewing gauge is nice to have, and a rotary cutter. I use a rotary cutter. It's just a faster way to get like a nice clean line, especially because you really need the edges to be nice and crisp. So it's like a long rectangular strip of fabric that you're using. So if you have a cutting mat, that's great. If not, just use a regular pair of scissors on a flat tabletop. And then of course you're gonna need some scrap fabric. I would say at least a 1/4 yard up to even like a 1/2 yard. If you want to make a handful of scrunchies, definitely get a whole yard. That'll be definitely helpful to make a few, which is cute for like gifts and whatnot. And here comes Pugsley. So if you have your own fabric, that's fine. What you're gonna do is cut strips that are about 7 inches by 42 inches for the regular scrunchies, or 8 inches wide by 42 inches long, which on the fold, it's gonna be about 21 inches long. You just keep that in mind when you're cutting the fabric. So I'll just lay that out like that. So for the zipper scrunchie, I add an extra inch. For the regular scrunchie, it's just 7 by 42, like I said before. So this is what these pieces should look like when you cut them. Again, you wanna make sure everything's nice and straight along the edges, or else your scrunchie might be a little crooked when you're sewing it, which is gonna be a little bit of a pain. So this is how it should look. If you order the DIY kit for the scrunchies from my site, they're available online in the Reap What You Sew DIY section. They will come pre-cut like this, and then there's little notches that you want to cut. So because I'm on an actual cutting mat that has a ruler grid already on it, the only places you're putting notches is in the fold, both at the top and the bottom of the fold line. So you're gonna actually have little baby snips. Might be a little hard to see it, but right there. So you wanna make sure that you have 2 little notches on the fold line, and then 2 more. Now you can either go 2 inches or 3 inches from the ends. I usually go like 2. If you need a little more room to sew, go to 3. Again, totally up to you, whatever your comfort level is. As long as you have the notches, that's all you need. So again, little notches on the fold line, and then 2 to 3 inches on both sides from the ends as well. And you're gonna wanna make sure that you have it on both layers, because that's how you're gonna line everything up when you're sewing it. So that's how it should look, whether you're doing the regular or the zipper scrunchie. And then you wanna open up the fabric, and right sides together, fold it hot dog style. I like to match up the center notch first, and then you match up the little 2 inch or 3 inch from the end notch. So there's that. Let me grab some clips. Now you can either clip or pin them. I feel like these little clips come in handy more, and they're easier to kind of pop off as you sew. So this is the 8 inch by 42 inch long zipper scrunchie. I'm gonna start with the regular scrunchie one. It'll be quicker to explain. They have similar steps, it's just a few more extra ones with the zipper scrunchie. So again, match up these center notches. Go ahead and clip that. And again, this is the 7 inch by 42 inch long piece. And then you match the notches at the end. And if you need to, you can add a couple extra pins or notches or clips in between, whatever makes it easier for you. The only kind of stitch you're gonna need with the machine for these is a straight stitch, so it's pretty easy. Okay, again, make sure everything's nice and flat, nothing's bubbled up or warped or crooked. So this is how it should look. So pin from one end of the notches to the other, like that. And so what you're going to do with the machine is sew from this one notch all the way down the length, and then stop right before the other notch on the other end. So then you leave both ends kind of open, and then that's going to be your closing seam for the next step. So, all right, so that's that for the prep steps. And next we're going to go to the machine and do that quick straight stitch. All right, so now that you have your item pinned and ready to be sewn, go ahead and start with the stitch. I would recommend a 2mm long stitch, and you can either use a like 1/4 inch seam allowance, 5/8, totally up to you, as long as it has a little bit of a seam allowance, because once you connect the ends, flip it inside out, you're going to want a little bit of seam allowance to help keep the seam kind of nice and flat, and that'll make sense as soon as we get to the next step. So, okay, so I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Start at the notch at the one end, lower your presser foot, do a little back stitch, and then just sew all the way straight down. I lied, that's more of a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, so once you get to the other end with that notch, that's 2 to 3 inches from the end, do another back stitch, trim off the excess tails on both ends. Okay, so it should look like that. And again, your ends should be open like this. Okay, so after you do that straight stitch, go ahead and flip the entire scrunchie inside out. Okay, so after you flip it inside out, you want to make sure that the center seam is all facing you in the same direction, because you don't want any twisting, because or else your scrunchie will end up twisted and you don't want that to happen. So again, make sure the seam is nice and flat facing you. Now fold it backwards like this, so that both the seams are on the outer side. And so the ends, the way that you left them open, this is how you're going to close them up, with another straight stitch. So if you cut it perfectly straight as a rectangle, you shouldn't have any issues with this being crooked or with the ends not matching up. So all you're going to do is take one side of the opening and then just sew straight down to connect the other end. So if you want, at this point you can pin or clip it just as like a little guide. Again, depending on your sewing level. I mean, you can either kind of like freehand it or put a few pins in just to give you a little guide. Okay, so that's that. And again, it should match up perfectly. You shouldn't have any issues with like extra fabric on one end. So go ahead, and I like doing a narrow seam allowance on this edge. I don't think it makes a huge difference whether you do a narrow or wide one. It's totally your preference if you want to do the same 1/2 inch, but I'm just going to go as close to the edge of like the presser foot. That's basically how I'm going to line it up. Go ahead and lower your presser foot and back stitch and just sew along the end. Again, you're going to do a little bit of adjusting just to make sure that everything's nice and flat with both layers. take your time on this step because you don't want to sew any extra fabric underneath and have any bunching. But you really shouldn't have too many issues right at this step. Sorry, there is a cat on my lap, so I'm trying to make sure I can still use the presser foot. Or the pedal. Okay. So you get to the end, back stitch, and then trim the excess tails. Okay. So then when you're done, pull apart the tube and you should have a little opening here. So now do you see why you want somewhat of a seam allowance? Because this will help you kind of automatically fold under the opening so that you can do a nice straight stitch to close it up. And that's after you loop the elastic. So that is why you want at least some of a seam allowance, at least like, let's do 1/2 inch. Let's just stick to that. 1/2 inch or 5/8, whichever your preference is. Okay. And it just looks a lot cleaner. All right, so after that, you're gonna take either a bodkin or a safety pin, whichever you have. And if you order the DIY kits, you're gonna have the scrunchie fabric and then the elastic included. I like an 8-inch long piece. I feel like that fits most people with like a double, like when you double up the scrunchie on your hair or on your wrist, either way. So if you need to, you can make it longer or shorter, totally up to you, whatever your preference is. So I use the bodkin, snap it onto one end, and then I loop it through a couple inches. I like to use a clip to kind of stabilize the one end along the opening, because once you start looping it through, you can kind of end up losing this tail inside the scrunchie, then you have to start all over again, and that's no fun. So go ahead and work through the scrunchie with the bodkin or safety pin, and then you'll start to see your scrunchie come alive. I personally like the ones that are kind of bigger. Might as well go big, right? All right, so once you get to the other end, it should look like that. Carefully take off the safety pin or bodkin. Now, some people like to just knot the ends. I feel like it's such a stress point. Just add a stitch to it. It just kind of gives it better long-term life. It's such a stress point for the elastic. So what you can do is just kind of layer both on top of each other, like 1/2 inch. And then just do a back stitch. I do a couple rounds like that. Again, trim off the excess tails. Like that. You can leave it as is or trim off the excess, totally up to you. I think it's fine either way. And then now you can close the seam. For anyone who has their own woven labels, like if you're a brand, if you have a little shop, this is the perfect spot to put your label in. This is where I usually put my label onto the item. It's great for branding and marketing. So what I would do is kind of let the fabric fold itself, and it will do that since you have that seam allowance. It's a nice little cheat sheet, like guide. So match the seams together, put a little clip there. I like to put a little clip towards the end of the opening, and then on the opposite side is where I tuck in my label. So here's what my label looks like. If you have a DIY kit, I'm not going to include these because not everybody wants a label, so I'm trying to save them too for my other items. All right, so I like to tuck it in all the way to the opening, the end of the opening, because in that way it's kind of nice and snug in there, and then you kind of know like where to stop sewing to close up the opening at the end. Okay, I like to have it kind of stick out a little bit, clip that in place, and then I use a compensating foot, but you can use a regular presser foot. Just make sure it's a nice narrow seam, like flush against the edge. This is exactly what a compensating foot is for. They're pretty great to have, so I recommend getting one. Okay, just backstitch and go ahead and sew along the opening. Okay, just kind of make adjustments as you go. But it should be pretty easy just to sew up the edge like this. Backstitch, and that's it. Pretty easy way to sew scrunchies. There's like a bunch of different ways to sew these up. I feel like this is the easiest way to make them, especially with like the ends looking nice and clean. I don't really like when people sew on the outside. I'd rather have it kind of seamless, if you know what I mean. So yeah, so when you're done, you're gonna have some loose threads, totally fine. Not the end of the world. Just kind of zhuzh it, and that's how it should look. Really cute scrunchie. A great way to upcycle a bunch of scraps. They make cute gifts for yourself, for other people. Definitely a good pandemic DIY project, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's that. So up next, we're gonna do the zipper scrunchie. That's gonna be the next method. Very similar to the steps of the regular scrunchie, just a few more because you're adding a zipper. So we're gonna do that next. So this is with the 8x42" strip of fabric. And you're gonna have a 4" zipper when you order the DIY kit again from us. It's a YKK zipper. They're my favorite to use. I think they're the most high quality. So you can use different lengths. I think 4 to 6 is a good length, maybe 7, depending on what you're using. But I would say 4 is a good start. It's just big enough and small enough to fit in little small accessories and essentials. So what you want to do first is mark the center, just eyeball it, doesn't have to be perfect. With the zipper pull side down, I would say just eyeball like a rough center. Just mark it, or you can put a pin. I just do like a faint little mark. You can kind of see it. It's black with white pencil. So like that. Again, with it closed and the zipper pull facing down, just kind of eyeball and mark off like where the center would be. Open the zipper. And again, with it facing down, you're going to match whatever that marking on the zipper is to the center notch, right side. Like that. Go ahead and pin or clip. And then pin the entire zipper flat against the right side like so. And then you're going to take the opposite side and do the same thing. So you're taking the zipper and matching that center notch with the center marking, because you want to make sure that everything's nice and even, or else your scrunchie is going to be crooked. So again, just kind of pin everything nice and flat. Like this. So it should look something like this. So the zipper's open and you have those sides pinned against the right side of the zipper, or I'm sorry, right side of the fabric of the scrunchie. And you can either use a zipper foot. If not, you can use a regular presser foot. Totally up to you. If you have it, great. If not, it's not the end of the world. You can make it work. All you want to make sure is that you're staying off the teeth of the zipper, because that can break your needles and that's no fun. So I'm going to stay around the edge like this. So what I like to do is, I know some people can take a longer zipper and trim it, and then that way you kind of have like an excess amount of like tails on the zipper. I'm going to recommend, since my zippers already have the 4" length as is, like it's the exact length, you don't have to make any adjustments. I like to kind of go like 1/2 inch from both ends. All right, so do the same thing on the other side. Again, start about 1/2 inch from both ends of the zipper. Back stitch. Okay, trim off the excess tails. Okay, so now close the zipper and then line up the notches again. And this is how you're going to enclose the zipper, because you don't want any openings. I like to leave the ends a little loose, just because that way I can kind of tuck it into the seam that I'm sewing. Because when you flip it inside out, you won't have to worry about these flipping out when you're like using it, and over time, you know, there could be things that cause it to get kind of pushed out. So I like to kind of tuck in the tails like so. In that case, I'm going to start from the end where the opening is. Again, if you need to put extra pins or clips to help you straighten everything out, that's totally fine. It's whatever your preference is. Okay, so again, you're going to kind of tuck the loose tails out. Use tweezers if you need to, like this. Because then, see how you kind of have it stabilized? You're going to sew right up to where it stops. And you'll know, because like it's going to kind of be difficult to have your presser foot go any further. Like that. Trim off the excess tails. Repeat the same step on the other side. Okay. So again, you're going to have to do a little bit of adjusting because you have that zipper pull there. And make it as flat as you can. Then you're going to be stopping right around where that zipper starts. Okay, so it should look like that. Now that you've done the stitch on both sides, this is when you flip it inside out. Alright, so now let's flip it inside out. Just like the regular scrunchie, just make sure that center seam is all facing the same side, that there's no twists. Zipper's there. Okay. And then fold it in half with that center seam on the outside. So it should look like that. And again, just like before, match the ends of the opening. So again, if you need to put a couple pins here, totally fine. And again, you can do a narrow seam allowance. And then just lay them flat against each other. Make sure there's no bunching underneath, which there really shouldn't be, as long as you cut the ends nice and straight. And make sure it doesn't tangle up with the other side of your press foot while it's going up and down. Tuck in those loose tails. Okay, and again, it should be like pretty close to a perfect match for both ends. If not, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure that stitch is nice and straight. Okay. So like the regular scrunchie, once you close it, it should look like this. A couple inches open. And then with the help of that seam allowance, you'll be able to close it up nice and clean like that. All right, so again, let's loop through the elastic. I'm gonna use my bodkin again. I love this tool, it comes in handy. And you want to kind of secure the one end at the opening before you loop it through. These clips are really convenient too. They're like quilter's clips, but I've used them for many different things, like sewing on hook and eyes into my Ayumi tops. I get them in like bulk on Amazon. You can get them basically anywhere. Just do a quick Google search. Just keep looping it through. Okay, so again, hold this down while you remove the bodkin so you don't lose it and it gets sucked back into the scrunchie. Take off the clip, do a little multitasking, and again, you're going to secure the ends. You can use tweezers too if that helps. Secure everything together, do a little 1/2 inch seam allowance, back stitch a couple times, and that's that. Trim off the tails. And then pull this closed. And same thing as before. With the regular scrunchie, go ahead and match the ends together, the seam. Clip or pin the one side of the opening, and then this is where I add my label with tweezers, like so. Just tuck it in, and then I push it in until it stops. And that's how I know when to stop sewing. Clip that. And just do a nice narrow seam along the opening like this. And I think it just looks more professional, more clean this way. Back stitch there. Trim the tails, and a little extra step since you have a zipper in this one. I like to reinforce both ends of the zipper. So you're going to kind of take, I want to also make sure the zipper works too. That'll help. So what I would do is just add a little reinforcing seam on both ends. It just keeps everything nice and contained. It's like a small, like, inch or 1/2 inch of a stitch, but I think it just makes the zipper a lot stronger. So all you're doing is just securing that zipper. And it just looks a lot cleaner too. So again, like from the end, Go about 1 inch out. And it may not seem like it's going to make a big difference, but I just feel like it really gives it a little more strength and durability, especially because you'll be using the zipper a lot and you'll be putting little things in there, and just add some strength to give it a longer life. Okay, and go ahead and zhuzh the scrunchie, trim off any excess threads that hang out. And that's that. You just made a regular scrunchie and a zipper scrunchie. So I have these available as made to order or as DIY kits, so totally up to you. You can order these already made. They take about a few weeks, or you can make them yourself. The DIY kits ship out a lot faster, like within less than a week. So I have the black and white webs, I have the ivory and black, or I'm sorry, cream and black webs. I just added these mesh ones. So you have the scrunchie bomb, the bat lace ones here, just super cute. And then I have the glitter spider web and the mesh spider. So these are super cute with the mesh. Oh, excuse me, mesh tulle fabric. So there's that, and then you have your mesh with silver metallic spider webs. So super cute. I'm gonna have my Sailor Moon scrunchies available soon. I'll have those available as made to order or DIY. So it's a great way that we're using our fabric to upcycle into these scrunchies. We've been making face masks out of them too, so we want to thank everyone for ordering those during this pandemic. So yeah, so a bunch of scrunchies here, super easy to make, and you can order them from us, either made to order or DIY, and you can make them yourself too. Thank you.